So now we'll have the Dharma talk for adults. And as I mentioned last week, our granddaughter Melody asked, Grandpa, why is the adult Dharma story, adult Dharma talk always so boring? And I didn't have a good answer for it. And nobody wrote any answers in the Facebook comments. So if you have any advice for how to make the Dharma talk for adults less boring, please put them in the comments below. And believe me, I'll look at them. Well, let's begin, as we always do, with the words of Shinran Shonin. Saved by the inconceivable working of Amida's vow, I shall realize birth in the Pure Land. The moment you entrust yourself thus to the vow, so that the mind set upon saying the Nembutsu arises within you, you're immediately brought to share in the benefit of being grasped, never to be abandoned. Know that the primal vow of Amida makes no distinction between people young and old, good and evil. Only Shinjin is essential, for it is the vow to save the person whose karmic evil is deep and grave, and whose blind passions abound. Thus, for those who entrust themselves to the primal vow, no good acts are required, because no good surpasses the Nembutsu. Nor need they despair of the evil they commit, for no evil can obstruct the working of Amida's primal vow. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So that's the words of Shinran Shonin from the Tanisho, a record and lament of divergences, and this is the first chapter. Today, I'd like to talk about how and why Bachi happens. So one of the big surprises for this Katonk, for this Japanese American from the mainland, living in Hawaii for the first time, was to discover how many people here use the Japanese term Bachi. Don't do that, you'll get Bachi. And not just Japanese American or Japanese people, like everybody I meet, everybody I've met here knows the word Bachi. So I'm constantly amazed at how pervasive Japanese culture and Japanese words are here in Hawaii. So today I'd like to talk about Bachi. Where does Bachi come from? What does it mean? And how Shinran's words, once again, speak to us almost 800 years later. So your grandfather or grandmother may have taught you about Bachi at an early age. Don't do that. You'll get Bachi. No, no, no. So Bachi comes from basuru, the verb basuru, which in the original Japanese meaning means to be punished for breaking the precepts of monastic life. So breaking the rules of being a monk and the vows of a priest, depending on your situation. But originally it meant to break the precepts of a monk. And if you do that, then you lose your status as a monk. What's interesting is the original meaning evolved over time to include the idea of karma in the consequences, as in the consequences of one's thoughts, words, and actions. So in other words, Bachi became sort of like instant karma. In very simple terms, if you do something bad will happen to you. So it's really easy to see why the first generation of Japanese immigrants brought the concept of Bachi across the Pacific with them to Hawaii. And actually I'm sure that most cultures have a word for this, have this idea of do something bad and something bad will happen to you. So Bachi became kind of like instant karma. Do bad stuff will happen to you. So don't do bad stuff. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. So where does the word or this idea Bachi come from? Well, I remember hearing a story during Sunday family service at the Senshin Buddhist Temple in Los Angeles, where my grandparents, my parents, and my brother and sister and I were members. So they told this story. Once upon a time, an elderly member, a kupuna of the Sangha, was concentrating so intently on the minister's Dharma talk, he closed his eyes to focus on the words. And he promptly fell asleep, snoring gently. And then, quite loudly. So the minister grabs the bachi, the striker used for the ceremonial gong, and he throws it at the elder, who shouts out, Ow! And Namuami Dabutsu as the striker bounces off of his head. The end. Is that a true story? I don't know. It sure makes a good one. But I love how the elder wakes up and says, Namuami Dabutsu. That, in a nutshell, is what ministers do. So this is said to be the origin of the Japanese expression bachi ga ataru. You will get bachi. I mean, quite literally, the striker will hit you is one way to look at this. And this expression is often used when teaching good behavior to children. So, true or not, this is kind of a funny story that you can tell when introducing the onaijin, the honorific inner sanctum of the altar area, to guests and visitors to our temples here in Hawaii. So it's, it is a play on words between two different kanjis. The complicated one at the top is bachi, the striker stick for the gong, which is the image that's there. And then the bottom one is bachi in the sense of punishment. So it's pronounced the same way, but different kanji, so different meaning. And so this is where kind of the joke comes from, that the bachi ga ataru. If you fall asleep during my Dharma talk, I will throw the bachi at you. I've only got a small one with me here, but I'll throw this at you. It'll bounce off your head. And Namo Amidabutsu, and you'll be saved. So anyway, that's the story, and it is kind of a funny story. But is it true or not? I don't know. Instant karma. So this idea of bachi. Have you ever noticed, like, bachi always happens to somebody else? So I know, maybe if you're like me, I mean, I can waste entirely too much time watching online videos of instant karma for stupid people who think, say, and do stupid things. So you do something stupid and then instantly something happens. So the idea that the universe will exact punishment on the bully, the bigot, the bad driver. So if you do something bad will happen to you. This interpretation of karma is very popular in American culture. But it's only half the definition of karma in a Buddhist sense. So when I become the object of bachi, or karmic punishment, karmic consequences, suddenly it's not my fault, it's that other guy who deserves to be punished. It's always about me, but never my fault. I think we'd all agree that bachi happens, and we'd also agree that we definitely prefer bachi would happen only to other people. So why? Why do we think of bachi this way? So it's about me. It always comes back to this. We know better, but we continue to remain stubbornly self-centered. And this is the human condition which Shakyamuni Buddha addressed 2,600 years ago. So the traditional path to awakening, the traditional Buddhist path to awakening, requires renunciation of this world. Give up all of your wealth, possessions, position, and going off to the mountains to become a monk. And through intensive training, study, meditation, and practice, one can confront the selfish ego. You can defeat the ego, and you can break free of the bondage of selfishness. This is the traditional approach in Buddhism. Unfortunately, not everyone is in a position to become a monk. So what should one do? What should one do? Well, I suppose you could become a Hongwanji minister. Hongwanji ministers don't have to become monks. We don't have to go to the monastery. We can be married, we can have children, and we don't actually have to give up anything. And that's a good thing, since there are times, of course, when I deserve bachi, because I think, say, and do things without considering the impact on others, or I act in anger and rage. Or worse, using angry looks, unkind words, or manipulative calculation to hurt other people deliberately. So I'm no better than anyone else simply because I'm allowed to wear the robes of a Hongwanji priest. I'm nothing more than Bonbu, an ordinary, unexceptional being, a human being, self-centered, ego-driven, living life as if it's always about me. But we must remember that Amida's great compassionate vow, the 18th vow, the primal vow, is the absolute assurance that because I'm unable to achieve awakening on my own, I'm unable to become enlightened on my own, Amida's vow, Amida's promise is that I will be born in the Pure Land, where I will instantaneously realize enlightenment and return to this world, to help others to help find their way to birth in the Pure Land. And just as I am, the karmic fool, Amida's compassion embraces me, never to abandon me. So, no matter how much bachi I may or may not, deserve for the things that I've thought, said, and done in the past, and the things that I may think, say and do in the future, Amida's primal vow, Amida's vow of great compassion embraces me. So my selfish instincts remain. I'm fundamentally a selfish, arrogant, self-delusional human being. That is my true nature. And yet I'm saved. I'm not worthy of such great compassion, and yet it comes to me, of all people. So Amida saves me just as I am. I can't begin to comprehend how Amida's vow works in real terms. But in purely subjective and personal terms, the light of Amida's wisdom illuminates my true nature as karma's fool. So my self-centeredness causes my stress, which I'm addicted to, which is a topic for another discussion. My self-centeredness also causes stress for other people, which I don't always think about in advance, but when it happens, I regret it. So the realization is that my self-centeredness is my true nature. And so Shinran's words make it clear to me that no matter how much bachi I may deserve, Amida's compassion is all-embracing. Amida's vow is to save me because I am such a karmic fool. So aware of my true self-centered nature and the consequences of my thoughts, words, and actions impacting other people, I'm enabled to try to think pure and beautiful thoughts, to try to say pure and beautiful words, and to try to do pure and beautiful things. And so I say Namo Amida Butsu in gratitude for the absolute reality is that Amida has got my back. And I share the joy of Namo Amida Butsu with everyone I meet. So let's return to the words of Shinran Shonin. Saved by the inconceivable working of Amida's vow, I shall realize birth in the Pure Land. The moment you entrust yourself thus to the vow, so that the mind set upon saying the Nembutsu arises within you, you are immediately brought to share in the benefit of being grasped, never to be abandoned. Know that the primal vow of Amida makes no distinction between people young and old, good and evil. Only Shinjin is essential, for it is the vow to save the person whose karmic evil is deep and grave, and whose blind passions abound. Thus, for those who entrust themselves to the primal vow, no good acts are required, because no good surpasses the Nembutsu, nor need they despair of the evil they commit, for no evil can obstruct the working of Amida's primal vow. The words of Shinran Shonin. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So just say Namo Amida Butsu and be saved by Amida. And if saying Namo Amida Butsu is not for you, just say Mahalo. And Mahalo for listening this morning. Namanda, Namanda, Namanda.